Attention, attention, stop what you're doing. Because we're coming back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
They went a little crazy with it, and I appreciate it.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back to the show, and we're glad to have with us Boston Brian, who is Dem Boston Brian on Twitter, if it still exists. It's been up and down all day. We don't know. Good to have you, brother, here with Johnny Million, live and lighter as we roll into this. Brian, what was your take on these rulings this week as well? I mean, I know we all. Well, go ahead. Yeah, I won't put any.
I think we should just come up with a fake situation. We should just create a fake dispute. We should put it in front of the Supreme Court and see if they rule on it, and then we can maybe legally discriminate against Republicans, I guess.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
We'll pretend we'll get some fake log cabin Republicans to argue that their marriage is not honored at CPAC and file a lawsuit against CPAC as a discriminatory organization and therefore doesn't have the right to rent or get federal support in any way. Like, that's essentially what we were looking at with this.
There's just no consistency in their rulings. You know, they rule in one way one day, and then the next day it's the total opposite thing. It's just like, where's the consistency, at least? You know.
Well, I think it's they're threading a needle. I think the lack of consistency is because you're looking at it from an ethical standpoint. Ethically, they seem inconsistent. Morally, intellectually, psychospiritually, they're inconsistent. But they are threading a needle. They are ricocheting through it like Yondu's arrow. They are finding the hole where they can do their thing, where they can, humanize corporations, where they can deny women rights or gay rights or whatever, but in a narrowly focused way so that they set a trap effectively for the next SCOTUS, so that, and make legislation harder to craft. That's one of the reasons I think why it stands out, is because people are like, that, how does that make any sense? Well, it makes sense if your goal isn't just to make something illegal or, or impossible. If you're trying to make it so that Congress can't remedy that through legislation by narrow casting it so much that it makes even the thought unconstitutional in that regard. So I find them incredibly consistent in that regard. It's just, if you're looking at lighting wicks.
Roll, everything happens so slowly that it's like it's hard to see it happening. When you see something every day, you don't really notice differences. But if you don't see somebody for a long time and then you see them again 2 years later, you'll notice if they got heavier, skinnier, fatter, longer hair, that type of stuff.
It's the power of incrementalism, and they recognize and have marshaled incrementalism. Now they've done it in big swaths. Honestly, their incrementalism in terms of getting people elected on a national level is falling apart. But claiming the courts as a form of incrementalism has absolutely been something they're up against. Now, the Biden administration has done as much as anybody else to try and, seat judges that will be reasonable and balanced and intelligent and actually care about the Constitution and those kind of things. But they're ice skating uphill in numbers against the 300 or so that Trump put in and the SCOTUS folks who are going to be there for a long time. They pick young ideologues and stack them on there, knowing full well that the process of extraction, your dollar for donuts kind of exchange in getting a SCOTUS seated, if you're a big donor or you're a big activist, is the payoff is way bigger and it's way harder to extract than
it's like
a
we
congressperson.
Have almost every single one of them on tape lying to the faces of the American people, saying that they will, precedent is not to be touched. Dobbs is what it is. Roe is what it is. It's not to be touched. Don't worry about it. We respect precedent. And then bam, you know what I mean? Not that much longer. They turn their tail and they know exactly, they show you exactly what cards they're playing with,
Well, the question then is that a form of, and this is why they thread things so tightly, I think, when they're writing stuff, or why they get backup from other people who were already there who made that lie a long time ago, is that they get to say, well, in general, I think it's settled law, but we were presented with a case that was a variance on the law, and therefore, found
Right.
a hole
Right, a
in that other
loophole.
thing, which is
Yeah.
how you get around it. I mean, is the legalese of it. Is why we are fixing the Electoral Count Act to make sure that somebody like Donald Trump doesn't think even that the vice president can just flip the votes and keep himself in office and then I guess snuff his boss and take over the country, which I don't know why Trump never considered that in his Mike Pence. That you do realize your folks were going to hang him, and then what's he going to do?
Yep.
Flip it, and then what are you going to do? Take a nap anywhere near him? He can
It's
pardon
still amazing
himself
to me
according
that
to
the
you.
wooden screws was just lying on the Capitol lawn for them to build. It's just-
Right.
it's amazing
Where?
they
Who?
found this
All right.
pipe.
Yes. Besides the pipe bomber, who built the gallows? Honest to God, and yes, and Boston Brian is with us as well. Dem Boston Brian on Twitter, if it still exists, at Johnny Million, and if you Twitch, and I think you do, twitch.tv/it's Johnny Million. Now,
That's me.
a lot of stuff came out, like the Biden response this week to these things, and we'll also cover this in the next segment. Brian is, he kind of, you could tell, had this "I told you guys" kind of attitude about this because he was right. I mean, he's like, we'll try, but we're ice skating uphill here, and
Similar
yet
to your attitude.
right. You'd
'Cause
think,
you were
right?
right.
I know. Well, because that's the thing. I want these changes to stick, and I think the problem with the slacktivist class online, especially the more virulent and sort of verbally violent ones, is
keyboard
the
warriors.
same. Yeah, the keyboard warriors end up being an issue of like DACA again. We got to a point where instead of pressuring the legislature over a period of time, the pressure shifted to 100% Obama. Obama has to sign something to fix this now, instead of we as voters need to fill the House and Senate with people who understand this issue. He needs to sign a piece of paper. And then from that moment on, it's been under attack. And these folks who were protected by it, who needed that protection, certainly have been on their heels, wondering if they came out into the sunshine, told who they were, exposed themselves, kind of like an don't ask, don't tell situation, and they finally came out, and then somebody can reverse the rules, and we've discovered you. You tricked into the sunlight, and that is a huge issue in these kind of things, and it's where the voters, I think, on our side especially, and again, not the average voter, the slacktivist voters, the online left, as it were, who just insist on these kind of solutions and then have no backup for the mandate. Once it happens or something goes through, they're like, what have you done for me lately? And it's back to threatening. So it's no wonder the Republicans don't fear a Democratic mandate most of the time and talk openly about how it won't go any further, because they know that people won't vociferously praise Biden even when he does something that they absolutely want. It's fascinating,
Right.
to me. There, hold on one second. And Johnny Million's going to farm questions for Boston Brian, by the way, just like we do with Phil Ittner. So in case anybody has those in the chat room, we'll
Hell,
throw
it
those.
would be awesome to see your beautiful face if I could.
Oh, you don't see me?
You can't see his beautiful face.
I can see Johnny Million, who looks.
Oh, I
wonderful.
see. I've got a screen going your way, so I should widen your frame. I'm definitely there. You might have to scroll to see me, but the screen should be there. I'm sending you footage. Believe me, we're here. Or you can open up YouTube and see what everybody's seeing. But right, it's all right. You're here. You're good. We got you. And we're gonna we might take an early break to see if we can figure that part of it out, just to make sure. And when we come back, we'll get some questions from the chat room for Brian on these issues. And yeah, give me 1 second. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Parks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
House Parks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So Johnny Million's going to gather some questions here, but I'm going to throw a couple of things into the mix that and see what Boston Brian's take on them is. There were a couple of things. One is, news just came out that Trump pressured Doug Ducey, the Arizona governor, around the 2020 election the same way he did in Georgia. They just didn't record it. But according to reports, Jack Smith has interviewed Doug Ducey, and Ducey said that Trump basically did, fellas, I need like 3,000 votes. That's just find me.
How would you not record that conversation?
Well, I think it caught him off guard. Like it was probably the first one and only one. He went back to trying to win Georgia because Arizona was lost. I think. Yeah, exactly. The other one, of course, is the striking down of Biden's student loan relief plan. This is, which was $10,000 for individual borrowers who make under $125,000 and $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients, which there will be a modification of. That'll be fine. That'll actually work out probably half of that still. The average borrower has $38,000 worth of debt. And the average borrower's payments are somewhere in the order of $200 a month. Most can be deferred through a bunch of different programs. I think a lot of people who are frustrated about this, I don't know all the things available. That's why Biden sent them to studentaid.gov, because I think a lot of people just don't know what's available to them to mitigate these things, especially as their payments come back online. And then the other one is that Americans are going to spend $100 million more on fireworks this year than they did last year. That's the expectation.
I am in a heavy fireworks zone. I'm right on the beach,
right
down in Boston, and it's firework heaven down here. So
right, yeah. Don't have a nervous dog. Do you have a nervous dog? Do you have a nervous? What pets do you have, Boston Brian?
No, I have no pets at the moment. I did have a dog, but I lost it in unfortunate circumstances.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it sucks.
Okay.
Steaks. Can you say that?
Yes. Yes, that's fine. Both work. Johnny Million, do we have a question?
The late night ones. I don't mind the ones that are in the 7, 8 o'clock range when all the other fireworks are going off. But once it's 2 a.m., 3 a.m. and they're still going off, I become like the old guy, get off my lawn.
Right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Johnny Million, I don't know if you've gotten a couple for them.
All my questions are, hey, are you married? You know you have beautiful eyes. And I'm begging for questions that don't have to deal with your comely appearance.
I do have not single for the chat. Just let
there you go. Just for the chat.
Not single.
Yeah, he's betrothed to another chat. And we do have some trolls in here who are new apparently, which is good. Yeah, it takes a while to get it. I think that was an adrenochrome reference that we saw.
What intelligent statements do they have?
Oh, that I'm a Hollywood pedophile and I need to stop doing drugs, which I again, that's why they're new. Yeah.
By the way, that blood you were supposed to send me never got here. So I don't know if
you know what?
Tracking on that, but
I blame Trump's post office appointee. He's diverting all of my adrenochrome straight to Brazil.
That's a great question. How is he still there, by the way?
Yeah, well, you have to have a vote on that panel, and it's hair thin.
Didn't Biden appoint another?
Yes.
So they still need one more in order to get him off? Is that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the difference. And they also need to have somebody in line to do it, and they can't get some of their other stuff through. Because, you have Tommy Tuberville holding up military appointments right now.
Smartest guy in Congress.
Yeah, so, oh, God. Brutal. Anyways, it's good that you're getting those same kind of questions in terms of that. Meanwhile, by the way, I would like to say I go through the news, and I think before we get to, because Philip Bittner's going to join us at the top of the next hour, and you had mentioned when you came on and we were kind of in break about what was going on in Ukraine currently. There's a lot of fascinating stuff I find about Prigozhin and that crowd and whether he's going to Belarus and stuff. And one of the most fascinating parts of this that that just came in over the wire right before the show started was that Prigozhin is shutting down the IRA, the Internet Research Agency that he started back to help Trump get elected, and that's been running, Russian propaganda and flooding rubles through super chats into the pockets of people like Jimmy Dore for the past 4 or 5 years. And it is officially being shut down. The St. Petersburg-based, and you'll love the name, Patriot Media Group. That's the English translation. How on the nose.
Did you hear that the Ministry of Defense is also taking over all Wagner weapons and stuff in Africa?
What?
Yes. Well, the big part was and this is the biggest dumb move of all the dumb moves by Vladimir Putin in the last, I guess, 72 hours.
He came
His
out and
admission,
straight said that they were funded. Yeah, unbelievable.
yeah, that they were birthed from the MOD, that they are funded by Russian funds. The idea that they're even a mercenary group at this point is ridiculous. And I don't know what the purpose of that was, other than these tanks were always our tanks. Is that kind of the idea that
the reporter that for the last 2 years has been telling everybody that Wagner
Oh my
is
God.
in no way related.
Yeah, because obviously Peskov doesn't care, his spokesperson, but the rest of those guys who've been defending, like, no, the attacks on pregnant women in Chad and South Sudan, and the murder of children and the strafing of civilians with gunfire. All that's Wagner guys, and those are Wagner guys that they hired from there, so they're like black Wagner guys anyways. And then it turns out, nope, they're the white ones and they're the Russian ones, and according to Vladimir Putin, they are direct soldiers at this point. Yeah,
And
actually do
also,
have
they
real
got like a
questions for
little bit of
Brian.
a Stalin-like purge going on over there with the arrest of some generals and
Yep.
the
Yeah,
butcher of Syria. They got the general that was responsible for the massacres in Syria and stuff, and the pullout of Kherson. The same guy, he was arrested. There's been reports that he's been let go, but it hasn't been confirmed yet. His daughter did some sort of weird interview saying that everything's fine, he's back, he's working, and nothing ever happened. So usually when a Russian says everything's fine, nothing ever happened, that something's going wrong in the
Yeah, exactly. It's like they have like kind of the life expectancy of Spinal Tap drummers. The minute anybody even says they have the sniffles, or no, he's on vacation. Okay, that means he's under a building somewhere being hit with a telephone
people that are
book.
getting arrested are part of these are the competent, or what you would call the competent Russian generals, right? So Hitler made the mistake of hiring people or putting people in positions because of loyalty and not because of competency. They weren't competent for the job. They were just very loyal to him. So he knew he could put them in the position. They do what he tells them, and that's that. So he's making the same mistake. Same thing with the head of, I can't think of his name now, but he's getting promoted. He's getting praised for his why can't I think of his name?
Which Shoigu?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. That guy in and of himself, like the irony that supposedly this entire thing was about Prigozhin trying to topple Shoigu, who had in defiance of what the will of Putin was, had wrecked the whole war and ran it into the ground, and we would have won in 6 days if it wasn't for this idiot, and he needs to be replaced. And it's so bad that I'm going to attack the capital of the country to get this guy fired. And he all but got a promotion.
Prigozhin made the mistake in his first speech of actually calling out Putin, and then he tried to walk it back and say, I wasn't really going for Putin. I was going for Shoigu and the rest of them.
Garamov or whatever,
Garamov and stuff.
Yep. Well, but again, these are people, and I think it always boils down to how does that affect our politics, and what is it reflective of? And if you look at Trump world, they are still laboring under the idea that Putin and Xi are brilliant, and are, Trump still is doing those lines about Xi being from central casting, and Putin, you can't argue with how tough he is.
All because of the population. Oh, look how many people live there. He's got to be the king. You know what I mean? You have to be tough and brilliant to rule that many people that are starving to death and have, fake libraries.
Especially when it turns out they don't actually exist. When, you have to be a strong leader to overcount your population by half the size of the U.S. population.
Right. It reminds me of that movie where they go interview the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
It's called The Interview.
Oh, yeah, The
Interview.
They go
Yeah.
to North Korea, and North Korea is set up, and they have all these grocery stores that look like they're grocery stores when you're driving by, but once you go in them, it's all cardboard, and it's it's not real fruit, and that's what China kind of reminds me of, that type of thing. It's a little bit of a facade.
Yes, that is precisely what you see when you go there. As somebody who's been there multiple times.
Right. And you can see there was an episode of Top Gear where they were in China, and they were amazed at how many roads they were building and the highways and all the bridges they were building. And there was no gas stations. There was gas stations, but they were not finished. There was or the ones that were finished had no gas in them. So it
Right.
was like they were basically running on fumes, and they were like desperate to find a gas station. I mean, it's like kind of like that sort of thing. They're spending money to build roads parallel to roads that they already have, just
Right.
to show off that they're building stuff. It's like
Well, and again, that is how you would pull a facade. That is how you create like the town in Blazing Saddles, where it's literally just right the fronts of buildings. You don't no there are no flush toilets, there's no plumbing, no nothing. And it is how you end up, by the way, one of the stories that's come out of China recently that's repeatedly happened is there's a fire in an apartment building. The fire department rolls up, attempts to attach their hoses to the fire hydrants, and the fire hydrants are just for show. They don't
Right.
actually have water coming out of them. And people have died. Buildings have burned to the ground. They've been raised because either through corruption or simply window dressing. The local head of whatever that provisional governor or whatever just wants it to look like a city. So they place these things all over the place for dogs to urinate on, but don't serve another purpose.
That's what Moscow is to Russia too. That's what
Yes.
Moscow is to Russia. They make Moscow really nice, and if you go outside of the outer regions, it's absolutely nothing like Moscow. And Russians actually have some sort of spite and hate for Moscow themselves, for the people that live in Moscow and stuff like that,
Oh,
because
wow.
of the way they live.
Well, for those people that don't know, too, Boston Brian is a World War II buff, is a history buff in general, but specifically about those kind of things. And you can, there's a lot of parallels and there's a lot of contrasts that you can make about the current situation that we're in. And I would argue that on a long game, we talk about incrementalism, on the long game standard of looking to the world like you are strong when you are weak or rich when you are poor or any of that kind of stuff, you could argue that the ghost cities in China and those fake gas stations and those fake roads to nowhere and all that kind of stuff is the equivalent of in World War II when the Allies put inflatable tanks and fake troops on the opposite side.
Patton's army, and that was actually brilliant, by the way.
Yeah, that there was that they basically so that the Luftwaffe would see like, oh my God, they're amassing tanks in this one area because they're high enough up. They looked like real tanks, but they were just balloons. But it tricked the Germans into thinking that the attack was going to come from an entirely different direction. It was a brilliant plan, and it absolutely worked. And you could argue that economically, that is the battle plan of China for the last, at least since Xi Jinping took over. Whether it was previous to that is a guess.
They even went as far as to have loudspeakers in World War II that played the sounds of tanks and people talking and smoking, and just they would drive a single truck around, and they'd put stuff on the tracks of a Jeep to make it sound like it, or they'd do something to the engine to make it backfire when it ran, to make it seem like they had more people where they weren't. I mean, they were very creative. It's the same thing they're doing. Like with Russia. Look at, I believe 3 days ago there was a strike in Kramatorsk that killed 8 people at a restaurant. Right.
Yep.
It was with an S-300, which is an anti-air, like it's an air defense missile. So why are they having to use their air defense missiles as offensive weapons? Probably because they're running
on civilian
out of
ground
their
sites,
stock.
right? Yes.
You know what I mean? So there's things you can why are they using these weapons if they, it's not what they're made for? I mean, it's just.
And that is, by the way, why it's excellent you pointed that out. Is exactly why the Z-focused Russian version of the Rada channel that I follow, like the mill bloggers that support Russia, are stacking since that explosion, since that missile strike, are talking about, are posting articles about how Russia is not going to run out of missiles. That is the primary article that they're copying and pasting. Most of them, by the way, pictures of the articles, not clickable, so that you can't read them and go, well, actually they might.
Right.
But or you might notice that they changed the date from 2022 to 2023, so it looks like they have just as many this year as they had last year. Instead of in one day, they burned through a month's worth of production of missiles, and that's why the war was supposed to originally take 6 days, because they could handle that. Now they're scooping up. They're it's good for the people of Africa to some degree because they are pulling back some of the arms that they've given to the Wagner Group and others to use in the Ukrainian theater of war that they were just using on civilians who didn't want to mine chips of diamonds for these psychopaths anymore. We're out of time on this hour. I want to thank Boston Brian for being on the show today. Dem Boston Brian on Twitter. Thank you so much, brother. And people need to check out your videos and follow you. And we will put links in this video after the show today so that people can find their way to you.
I appreciate you immensely. I appreciate your fans. They're great people, and I just enjoy talking with you guys. I think more people should do it, and more people should subscribe to this channel.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. And we will we'll talk again soon.
Nice to meet you, Johnny. Have a good one.
Yeah, have fun, you guys taking over the show when I can't be here someday. Okay, we'll be back.